Hi, y'all. Today we're going to be talking about improving the moment, a core distress tolerance skill. So, our goal here is to strengthen the skills and strategies at our disposal for improving the moment when a negative event or crisis arrives in order to make it easier to tolerate and possible to survive. The skill can be particularly helpful to practice when you're feeling a very strong negative emotion and an acute crisis and distress, when you're in a stressful situation that might be long lasting, and when distract and self soothe, the other strategies we've overviewed, aren't working well enough in the moment. So, in terms of what our options are to improve the moment, we have this acronym here, IMPROVE, that stands for imagery, meaning, prayer, relaxing actions, one thing in the moment, vacation, and encouragement. And I'll spend a few minutes here breaking down what each of these generally is tapping into. Um, Knowing that you can use the IMPROVE acronym to memorize this, but also feel free to please take out handout 9 in distress tolerance to have something to refer to. So, first off, imagery. You can use imagery to help yourself create a situation different from the actual one that you're experiencing in a time of acute stress and crisis. So, in a sense, it's like leaving the current situation, but with imagery rather than actually leaving, we're able to make sure that the situation that we go to is safe, secure, and likely to be grounding. Next up, we have meaning. And the idea here is that often individuals need to find meaning in moments of crisis, of extreme suffering or pain, in order to be able to survive or feel like hopeful, able to get through that really challenging situation. So we can think of making meaning as the equivalent of kind of making lemonade out of lemons, trying to find the positives or the benefits in even a really stressful, difficult situation. Next up is prayer. And the essence of prayer typically is to open yourself up completely to the present moment. And this practice is really similar to the idea of radical acceptance that we'll dig into a little bit later in this module. But it's important to note that the idea here of prayer is kind of opening up to the experience as it is, to asking for strength, asking for support, and endurance, rather than kind of praying to necessarily get out of the situation or have the suffering be taken away. Next up is relaxing actions. And the key here is really to focus in on the activities or the things that you ordinarily find help you to calm down pretty effectively, to feel more calm and at peace. So when you're relaxed, it's usually far easier to resist the temptation to engage in crisis behaviors. So by feeling kind of relaxed, we have the time to think and to actually do some of the more cognitively heavy tasks. So say use pros and cons, to really think through the situation. But often before we can even use that skill, we really need to find something that can help us feel more calm and grounded. And relax is really getting at those specific strategies like having a cup of tea, taking a hot bath, that help do that for you. Next up is one thing in the moment. And this is really kind of a synonym for the one mindfully skill in terms of the what and how skills that we reviewed in core mindfulness. Um, and although it can be incredibly difficult to do in the moment that we're experiencing a crisis or a very intense negative emotion, focusing fully on one thing in the moment can be a really helpful way to ground ourselves and to help ourselves again kind of be able to have things around us settle when things feel really chaotic or in crisis. And the secret here can be to remember that in the moment that we're experiencing a crisis, we just have one thing to do, and that is survive just that present moment. And we often can kind of add suffering to pain by, when we're in crisis, reflecting on really negative things that have happened in the past or ruminating about the future and more potential suffering to come. And in reality here, we kind of DBT holds that there is just this moment that we have to contend with. And by focusing fully on the present moment and surviving just that moment, we can take some of that suffering off of the pain. Next step is taking a vacation, which is essentially taking a mini vacation from adulthood, say retreating into yourself, allowing yourself to be taken care of for a moment. And the trick is really to do this in a way that does not cause harm to you, and to make sure that the vacation is brief and time limited. So it shouldn't last for, say, more than a few minutes and not longer than a day. And for all of us as adults, it can be really important to make sure, if we're going to use this strategy, that and if we have specific responsibilities, say taking care of your kids, making sure that the dog is fed, and that your workplace responsibilities are taken care of, that in order to use the vacation, that we make sure there's coverage for any necessary and essential tasks that need to be done, whether that be from a family member, a partner, or someone that's able to take over your duties for just those few minutes or that day, so you can fully take that time out to regroup. Finally, we have encouragement, which is cheerleading yourself and rethinking the situation. The idea here is to talk to yourself as you would talk to someone else that you love dearly when they're in a crisis, or how you would like someone else to talk to you when you're in a crisis, because we know that one of the strongest predictors of relationship functioning is having a higher ratio of positive remarks and comments to negative remarks and comments. And that same rule applies to our relationships with ourselves, meaning that the more we tell ourselves kind of positive and encouraging things in respect to, say, negative things and put downs, the more positive our overall sense of well-being will be. And also that it can be very helpful to give ourselves encouraging statements when we're feeling particularly stuck in crisis on thoughts that say things are hopeless, that they won't ever end, or that you can't do what's needed. And that encouragement can be a really helpful opposite action to those thoughts. So on handout 9 in your distress tolerance part of your workbook, there's a whole bunch of ideas and strategies for how you can do that. And I've cherry picked just a couple from each that touch into each of these domains, say imagining very relaxing scenes, or finding purpose in a painful situation, taking a hot bath, or going to the woods or the beach for a few hours or a day to take a vacation. The idea here is that there are a whole lot of options at our disposal for how we can improve the moment. And the key point is that improving the moment can be idiosyncratic, meaning that specific strategies can be more or less effective for different people. And these strategies can be context specific, meaning that you might find specific strategies to be more or less effective for different types of crises that you experience, say different emotions that can become very intense, say anxiety versus anger, as well as different types of situations and vulnerabilities you might be experiencing. And so having a whole wealth of options at your disposal, and specifically understanding which of these options tend to be most effective for you and most accessible for you, can be really helpful information to have going into kind of those moments of acute stress, so that you know what you can rely on to navigate that crisis in that moment. Finally, on worksheet 9, or handout rather, 9A, there's one more skill for improving the moment, and this is specifically improving the moment with sensory awareness. Sensory awareness essentially is an extended 10 to 15 minute practice in observe and describing, and specifically in observing and describing our physiological sensations and inner experience in a moment that we're feeling acute stress, with the goal of enhancing our overall sense of calmness and peace. So it typically involves a series of questions that we can either ask ourselves using the guided script on worksheet 9A, or using any number of guided meditation recordings that are available to you. And often the guided meditations will walk through questions like what's on the board here. So say, can you feel your hair touching your head? Can you feel the space between your eyes? Can you feel the bottoms of your feet, the tops of your hand? And you'll continue to go through these questions, paying really close attention to your inner experience until you kind of feel connected with a greater sense of that calmness and peace and presence in the current moment. I included here a QR code, which you can scan with your phone if you have a QR code scanner, or the link is up on the screen for the YouTube video as well. And this is a guided script, someone going through the worksheet exercise on 9A, that I find really helpful, because in moments of acute stress, it can be really difficult or crisis to read the script yourself. So know that there are also guided versions available to you that you can practice with to get more familiar with what this practice looks like for you, or in the moment that you need it most. Some final key takeaways here. We want to make sure that we practice the strategies and skills of improving the moment in all settings and context. And remember that these strategies are idiosyncratic, meaning person specific, and can be context dependent in terms of how effective a specific strategy might be for you, which is why it's really helpful to have a whole bunch of strategies at our disposal and to practice to really overlearn the skills of being able to access these strategies and know what will be most effective for you during intense emotions and crises. And so by practicing when we're at lower levels of distress, we make it more likely that when we are in that crisis, we'll be able to access what we need most. Okay. And finally, it's really important here to balance improving the moment with staying present in the moment as it is. And the point here is that intentionality matters. So here with the distress tolerance skill of improving the moment, we're focused on ways that we can use this skill to survive or tolerate acute, intense negative emotion or crisis. And it is possible to overlearn or kind of overuse these strategies rather in a way that actually can pull us out of the present moment and away from effective action. So it's really important that we make sure that we're improving the moment such that we can survive and move through those crises, those peak waves of negative emotion, whilst also staying connected enough with the emotion to act effectively. And to make decisions that are kind of in touch with our wise mind and in touch with the facts of the situation. All right, so if y'all can review the strategies on handouts 9 and 9A and note the ones that you already practice, the ones that you already find fairly effective for improving the moment for you, as well as any strategies which perhaps you haven't thought about before, but that you might be able to try. That would be awesome. I look forward to seeing you in group, and thank you for tuning in today.